So, hello everyone. Today we have CA Harsh Mohta, who is in Amsterdam right now, and he's a CA as well as he has done his MBA. So, let's hear his story from his own words. So, hi Harsh, how are you?
I'm good, Kaushik. Thanks for inviting me over. Uh, yeah, feels nice.
Uh,
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So, first of all, uh, very thank you to you that you accepted our request for a podcast to share your story.
Of course.
So, can you tell how do you started your CA journey and how you moved to Amsterdam after like working in India?
Yeah, of course. So it's funny, right? So my wife and I we were just talking about it recently because next week actually marks 10 years for both of us in the corporate world. So
That's
we,
great.
we basically started our articleship around the same time in 2014. She started with EY, I started with Deloitte. So it's been quite a long and shared journey, sort of almost milestone at this point. I mean, my CA started just like how everyone else's CA journey starts, right? So right after 12th grade boards, so somewhere about 2013, I knew I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps and become a chartered accountant. So that's sort of where it all began. And like many others, I took on the CA journey sort of alongside college. And honestly, that second year was no joke, man. Like because I was in Xavier's in Calcutta, which basically meant it was mandatory classes every day.
Correct.
But I was doing articleship with Deloitte, which, as you can imagine, wasn't exactly a 9 to 5 situation. So sometimes my days would start at 6 a.m. for college. I used to go, at 10:30 my articleship used to start, and that would go on. I would go on to often be working until 6, usually much late in the night, to be honest. So it was quite intense, but I think it was also shaping me for the future. And honestly, on my CA journey, if I look back, I think CA is really an amazing jumping off of point for anyone who wants to start a career in finance. Honestly, the amount of information that you learn over the 5+ year period that it takes to get in a CA is just incredible. It's like the boot camp for the finance world, honestly.
Correct, correct. So that's so inspiring for us because we also come from Calcutta and many of our audience belong to that side.
Okay.
So, so like after CA, how did you get or got your first job and what company it was?
Yeah, so I once I did my articleship, right? So for me, at that point, due diligence or transaction services sort of was the hot thing because a lot of my friends who did it from the previous attempts as well were doing due diligence. So for me, that sort of became the natural progression. There's a lot of skills that you learn during an audit, which is what I did my articleship in. There's a lot of transferable skills that you can actually leverage to move into a transaction services space. So that's what I did. So I moved to Bombay. I joined EY in their transaction services team. So their team is national, so I would work with a lot of different locations, but sort of Bombay was my primary place of work. So yeah, I did a lot of due diligence. I did some 15, 20 due diligences over the course of 2.5 years that I was there doing M&A in sort of multiple different fields, mostly real estate and consumer, but sort of touching a spectrum of different industries.
So your articleship was in stat audit, right?
Yeah, so purely stat audit.
And then you moved to due diligence.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very natural jump that a lot of people have now also started to do as well.
Correct. Yeah, a lot of people are going towards due diligence and M&A right after clearing their C.
Yeah, because it's a much shorter learning curve, to be honest. Like a lot of the fields, for example, let's say if you talk about the core big four fields, right? If you talk about say transfer pricing or an IDT, these kind of fields where it's very specialized knowledge. So if you did that in articleship, sort of it's a little bit easier to move in to that. But for due diligence, it's the same thing where if you've done audit in your articleship, it becomes a much shorter and much easier learning curve to go there.
So, like when you decided to go for an MBA.
Honestly, once you do your CA and you're a few years into a corporate life, right? There's always that one moment where you're sort of at the crossroads. Okay, now what next? And honestly, somewhere in the back of my mind, it was always an MBA. But for me, the decision was it was really based on where I wanted to take my career. I think CA really gives that sort of very deep dive into technical aspects of finance and accounting. But it's also a double-edged sword, because having only surrounded myself with Indians in the finance and accounting space, it kind of sort of narrowed my vision and made it a little bit myopic. And for me, the idea was really to broaden my horizons beyond that. If you talk about, say, something like a lot of people also think about pursuing, for example, a CFA. I think CFA or a CAIA, FRM. I think these are sort of really good qualifications, but that's if you want to get into specific fields of asset management, investment banking, or risk analytics for in case of FRM. I think there it makes more sense. Or the second way it makes more sense is if you sort of do those as an add-on degree as opposed to a primary degree. And I know a lot of people are going to come at me angry if I call CFA an add-on degree, for example, but that's sort of the way that I look into it. For me, I was really drawn more towards the leadership and strategy side of things, sort of understanding the bigger picture of how businesses operate locally and globally, seeing an end-to-end, having that end-to-end visibility of how businesses are run. And for me, that's really where the idea of getting an MBA sort of clicked in my head. And it wasn't also just about learning. For me, it was also about surrounding myself from people, from different industries, from different parts of the world, and really sort of to come back to that point, sort of stretching my mindset and sort of broadening the way that I think about things. That's why sort of I chose to do my MBA at Cambridge as well, which for me is really a mix of sort of world class education, but also the international exposure I was looking for. I think there was like four people from 40 different countries in my MBA cohort. So sort of people coming in from all walks of life, all places around the globe, and yeah, it sort of the MBA really allowed me to pivot into new areas, and the learnings and the interactions I got from my cohort was incredible.
That's great. So like after MBA, you moved to Amsterdam and like started the job there, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So like can a CA fresher who is just qualifying, suppose in May 24 or who will be qualifying in November 24, can they aspire to work in the Middle East or the Europe side, just being a CA fresher, or they had to have some experience like you had in EY?
Yeah, so that's the interesting part, right? So I mean, of course, a CA can work outside of India even without additional degree. So I went in when I went about the MBA route, the additional high degree route, but you don't necessarily have to do that. I have a lot of friends here in Amsterdam, for example, who, and not just in Amsterdam, actually across the world, who were basically working outside India without having studied abroad or without having got that additional master's somewhere else. But the thing is, it doesn't necessarily translate the same way to a fresher CA, because if a CA, for example, has 5, 7, 10 years of experience, whatever that may be, they really have a demonstrable history of sort of stellar work experience that they can leverage on for such move. I mean, if you're in an interview, right, employers typically are not going to trust someone who has sort of just finished their studies, has no work experience, let alone work experience in that particular market or geography. So it becomes that much of a difficult task to be able to convince someone to employ you with the kind of money that you know working in Europe or working in Middle Eastern places really pay you, and sort of not having something on your CV or your experiences to really back up that kind of task. I think circling back to the point of the additional degree, right? I think from my personal experience, studying abroad, getting that one master's, if because I understand it's not also possible for everyone for monetary and non-monetary reasons, but sort of trying to get that additional master's is the easiest gateway in securing a job outside India.
Correct, correct. So they can start with the Middle East, or at first they can have some experience like you had in FDD, and then they can move out through the master's route or the direct route as well.
Yeah, I really think that it needs to be done through one of those two.
Correct. That's the most top question of the town, like whether we should go for an MBA or not, and like whether they can
Yeah.
directly work in the.
And
So
honestly,
just
an MBA is not just an MBA that you need to work outside, right? Like I mean, I know a lot of people who go for say masters in finance or masters in financial analytics if you're more in a finance space, or you can go for sort of a lot of people go do an MIM route, which is kind of like what I like to call a mini MBA. It's called Masters in Management. It's sort of a degree you get prior to work X, or basically if you have maybe 1 year of work X, you can still go there. So there's you don't have to only keep in mind an MBA. Yes, for me, and I'm sort of being a little bit biased here, I think that's the better route to go. But there are other degrees you can explore as well.
Right. So when we talk about degrees, so what is the importance of a skills? Like we regularly talk that financial modeling or the Excel analytics, Alteryx, these are the future tools. Then there's a talk of AI in the town. So what is your take? Like how a skill can elevate you, ourselves in the job?
So with skills, there are really two types of skills, right? You can either talk about hard skills or soft skills. So if you talk about hard skills, for example, I mean, yes, Excel modeling is important. Data analytics, all of these are important, but they're sort of going to be your next stage of upskilling that you do within the job. For example, like when you come in, you're not, more often than not, if you're a fresher and you come in, you're not going to be an expert on Excel. A lot of the Excel that I have learned throughout my career has been, at least that stepping stone has really been learning from the people who are my seniors on the work. Okay, like the first day I learned how to do a VLOOKUP. I didn't know how to do a VLOOKUP when I first came in, right? So it's just, you sort of learn on the job, and that sort of snowballs into it. And once you have that little bit of base, then I think it is imperative to start to learn how to model things. But for me, more important is not the financial modeling side of it, but to understand the inherent modeling in itself. So what I mean by that is, at some point, if you become a master at Excel, I mean, yes, you can model out, but you need to understand what you're modeling. What are the drivers that's really driving the business? What are the factors that make sense as a driver? What are the ones that don't make? What is the quality of the data that you have? What you can do with it and what you can't do with it, and sort of having that judgment to apply. Okay, this is what I have, this is what I need to get to, and sort of how do I find workarounds? How do I brute force multiple data sets? Sort of that becomes the more important thing. But that's on the hard skills sort of thing, right? I think soft skills are the one that's also sort of sometimes left out, but I think very important as well. Like, at the risk of generalizing, I think one of the first things that CAs, especially sort of fresher CAs, new CAs who've just qualified, really need to do is upskill on their presentation skills. And I mean, I know a little bit of generalizing there, but I think robust analysis is almost never an issue with CAs because of the kind of the volume of information that we study during the entire course of it, and just the applicability of it. I think that's not an issue. But how that analysis really needs to be presented across, especially to senior and or non-financial stakeholders, is very important. It's incredibly important. I mean, there's a lot of finance professionals, we tend to go a lot of jargony. There's a lot of jargons we use, there's a lot of buzzwords we use, which doesn't, I mean, if you've learned finance, you know what I'm talking about. But if you've not learned finance, you're talking to someone in operations, you're talking to someone in product management, they're not going to understand at least 30 to 40%, if not more, of what you say, because they're jargon. So you need to be able to explain it in more lay people terms on what that means. I think
Like
that's
people
really important.
management is what you are focusing on, right?
Yeah, because uh, after a certain point of time, and especially depending on the industry you go to, a lot of, like for example, a lot of my work is really around people management, because I do a lot of business finance, FP&A. For me, it's really about sort of being that central fulcrum within the organization and trying to manage all multiple stakeholders throughout, up, down, left, right, across the spectrum, right? So for me, that really becomes sort of your primary skill to have.
Correct. So is there any textbook that so that we can learn the soft skills, or like what is your suggestion on this?
I think it comes in as part of culture and exposure, and I'm gonna sort of bring it a little bit back to my MBA, right? So for me, I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned during my MBA was, because, like I said, I wanted to go into an MBA to interact with people of all walks of life, right? Not just finance professionals. And one of the things that I realized was there are more than one right answer. So it's not necessarily that if I say something which is correct, that automatically means what you, Kaushik, say something is wrong. No, because there could be two right answers, and trying to have the sort of emotional intelligence and that EQ to understand. Okay, it's not always black and white. It's not always binary. I think that sort of makes it. That's already a step one to it. And for, for me, it's but the more you surround yourself with people who are not of your thought process or from your background or from uh, your calibration. I think that sort of recalibrates you to be a little bit more receptive and a little bit more understanding and being able to communicate with people from different aspects, from different spaces.
Correct. That means a friend circle uh, should have all persons from all walks of life, not just the finance or the CA profession in particular.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'll give you an example. Some of my closest friends from my MBA, for example, there's an Indian guy who did product management and energy transition. There's a French guy who used to be building cool automotive ATVs and those kind of things. There was the Colombian girl who used to do SNOP for a FMCG company. So it's really about trying to understand what you don't know, and it doesn't mean that you're going to become an expert in all fields, right? It's going to be you're going to have the sort of that base level idea of different things, and sort of be a little bit more sensitized to other people's point of views.
Correct, correct. So that's the thing I also follow. So
Yeah.
what is your so you are now in FP&A, right?
Yeah.
So and we have been seeing all your posts like about your data analytics and FP&A. So what is your take like how this profession will go on in the say next decade?
I think a lot of what FP&A is today is sort of trying to use the information that you have and trying to model and predict going forward, right? So I think, and without sort of overrating data, I think one of the biggest sort of issues that I have realized, especially, so prior to my current company, I was working for a scale up that was a scale up, right? So it's a lot of the business and the sales really boomed at some point, and the support functions and enabling functions were trying to play catch up. So it wasn't necessarily at the sort of, for example, the finance function wasn't at the size or at the maturity that it should have had commensurate to the revenue of the company. So for me, when I came in, and coming from a world of big fours, because I'd only been in big fours before, and really clients who can afford big fours have big money, so they're more mature organizations, they have better quality of data. And I came to this company, and the data quality was not ideal. And sort of then it comes back to, okay, now what do we do? Okay, let's try to clean the data. Let's try to find rules of thumbs that we can use. Let's try to brute force multiple data sets together to make sure that it makes sense. Let's try to then at some point, after doing everything that I could, and then sort of still falling short of where it needs to be, then like, okay, now we need to get in some outside help. So we got in, for example, uh, an external data analytics firm based in India to come and sort of clean up our entire data, build up a lot of the automated financial models, build up an entire Tableau landscape for us. And it's, I think once you have all of that, then sort of you come, okay, now I'm at the base level of where I need to be. I think FP&A today is 70% data cleansing and 30% doing actual data work. And to give you a very long answer to a very short question, I think in the next 10 years, that 70-30 ratio really needs to be optimized for sort of more value add activities, because today only 30% of an FP&A professional's time is really spent on doing value add.
So what do you feel like with the advent of AI? So will that ratio will be changed in the next 10 years?
So it's interesting, right? And then I often in my free time also think about what that would mean. And sort of at the risk of giving more boilerplate generic answer, I think AI, we all agree, is sort of more a when question rather than an if question at this point. But as I like to say, the proof of the pudding is really in the eating. I need to see it to believe it. So for me today, like I try to attend a lot of the workshops and seminars, especially around predictive planning or around deployment of AI and ML. And there was one particular one that I attended last year where there was a business controller from a leading F&B company. I don't want to take the name here, but it's basically he was speaking at the seminar and he had a presentation on how they leverage AI and ML to sort of identify particular markets and particular geographic markets for their marketing initiatives to increase their return on ad spend, and sort of using hundreds and thousands of data points, if not millions, going back multiple years of historic data on seeing how certain markets have been more elastic or inelastic to the amount of advertised or marketing bureau spent. So I think, but the thing is, these are sort of more isolated examples of where I've seen them being used. And outside of, say, financial institutions in the credit space where AI is a little bit more prevalent, I think the widespread use of AI has not really happened. And it's also, someone told me this when I was talking to this lady recently who's in the data analyst space. And sort of she's doing a lot of this. And because no one really wants to be the first idiot. So it's like, you have a lot of places you have first mover advantage. In technologies like this, you also have first mover disadvantage, which is, a lot of, and we've seen news, right? A lot of companies sort of have tried to deploy ChatGPT on their version of that and sort of input information that was a little bit more confidential to the company, and sort of that became part of the larger database that these large language models have. So I think it's a little tricky. It's coming, but it's not there yet. I want to see how it will work. But like I said, right, a lot of the value add is probably still a human is still a human intervention, because uh, drivers. I mean, you can train the AI to sort of capture sort of more macro drivers on how your forecasting is going to work, or what's going to be impacted by, say, currency fluctuations, or by interest rates, those kind of things, by inflation. But at some point, what drivers are important and what drivers are relevant or appropriate to your particular business, that will come from your understanding of the business, and that is not something I believe that AI will be able to completely own by.
Correct, correct. So with AI, everyone is at a like a confused, like what can happen.
Do you use AI?
Yeah, I do use like Chat GPT. I was the first one to adopt it. So like when it came back, GPT-4 is there, and few other
Yeah,
tools that we can use through other like data extraction or data mining, we can say.
yeah,
So because I believe at the end we have to accept it. Like it's a like the computer moment in the 90s that happened.
yeah. I,
So
I think
everyone
so
should
too. No, that's right. I think it's just about how we're going to use it and what it becomes in the future. I think, yeah.
correct. Like as of now, no one knows like what will be the impact of AI, but we are just starting to embrace it. Okay, okay, it's a fact.
Yeah, it's super embryonic at this stage, but yeah, for me, I try to use it a little bit as much as I can. Yeah, but it's coming. It's not there yet, but it's coming.
Correct. So like I have seen Deepak Uncle, like he was like my father's friend. Like Deepak Uncle and my dad used to stay in same hostel. I would like to tell the audience. So how like he shaped your career? Like you already had a role model right from the beginning. So how he helped you grow at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, is is right from childhood, right? To be able to see sort of someone with that kind of work ethic and that kind of ability to talk to people and sort of get everyone along with him, be it someone who's an 8-year-old child or an 80-year-old grandparent, and sort of being able to see how he can sit in with everyone and hold conversations for hours at a stretch. I think that sort of really uh, I don't think I have that level of interpersonal communication as much as I want to, but sort of that's really the gold standard in my head on when I want to be. And sort of for him, so he's CACS costing, so he's done sort of everything, and that really also becomes my gold standard. And okay, that's what I want to be. I've seen what getting those degrees and sort of having the right work ethic and having the right body of work gets you in life and gets you the kind of success that it does, and the uh, life that he's been able to provide for my family and I. So sort of that really becomes okay. This is the template that I need to imbibe, and this is the rubric that I'm going to be judged on.
Correct. So, like, I would like to share a small story about it. Like, in 2020, when I was in CA intermediate, like, I failed. So, at that time, definitely I was dejected because before that, I never failed in my life. So, my dad told me, okay, connect with Sandeep uncle and Deepak uncle, they might help you. So, I had a brief chat with them, and it was like a eye-opening moment. It got like it helped me to stand up from my failure and like target. And then after, like, I cleared my CA finals in one go. So that's a big thanks to uncle and definitely you.
Yeah.
So we have a few quick fire round. So you worked in both the countries, like India, the Netherlands. So which city is your favorite? Kolkata, Bombay, or like the Amsterdam?
I would say, I think because of the sort of friends that I have, I would go Bombay, but I think the quality of life here and the quality of work here, I will have to choose Amsterdam.
That's great. So if you have to choose any one thing, CA or MBA, what will it be?
That becomes very difficult. I think I can't choose both. It has to be CA then MBA. Like for me, eh, what I am today is sort of an accumulation of all of my past experiences. So for me, CA then MBA.
Correct. So Big Four or industry, like you work Big Four for a very long time, right? From articleship, and now you are
Yeah,
in industry FP&A.
I will have to say industry. I think the Big Fours are a great school. Big Fours teach you a lot that you need to do, especially in your corporate world. But I think that there comes a time in your life, in your professional career, where sort of uh, you're always on the outside looking in, especially when you're in a big four or in any sort of consulting, because you come in, you do your work, you do your analysis, these are your recommendations, these are your proposals, and then you're done. But when you're actually in a company, your decisions, your proposals have real life implications and decisions that are taken for the company, and you actually get to see the end to end of how a company is run and what you do really factors into the larger scheme of things. So for me, definitely industry.
That's great. So thank you, Harsh, and like for taking out time for our audience as well. So
Of course, no,
thank you,
I'm
everyone.
really happy. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone.